Kendrick Johnson was born on October 10, 1995, to Kenneth and Jacqueline Johnson. The youngest of their children, he held a special place within the family. His mother described him as the joy, laughter, and energy that filled their home, while his father often admired his natural gift with numbers, a talent that set him apart at an early age. Those who knew Kendrick remember him as polite, fun, and well-mannered, someone who carried himself with respect while inspiring affection from friends and relatives alike. His personality reflected both ambition and warmth, making him a young man who stood out in his community. Kendrick was also an athlete with undeniable talent. He excelled in basketball, football, and track, showing both skill and determination. In every sport he pursued, his dream was to one day play professional football, a vision that reflected his drive and resilience. Beyond athletics, Kendrick loved science and mathematics, embracing subjects that challenged his curiosity and intellect. Within the Johnson household, Kendrick's role was more than just that of a sibling. It was a source of support, laughter, and connection for his family. His siblings shared a close bond with him, strengthened by countless memories and experiences that shaped their lives together in the wider community. Kendrick was seen as a promising young man with a bright future. Teachers, coaches, and peers recognized his potential, both academically and athletically. To them, his future appeared filled with opportunity. This early portrait of Kendrick Johnson is essential. His story is not defined only by the tragedy that later surrounded his name. It is equally about a teenager full of life, ambition, and hope, whose potential was cut short, leaving behind questions that continue to fuel the pursuit of truth. On January 10, 2013, the hallways of Lone D's High School in Valdosta, Georgia, were filled with the sounds of students moving between classes, conversations echoing through the large campus. Among them was 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson. At 1:27 p.m., school surveillance cameras captured Kendrick walking into the old gym. This particular gym was no longer used for physical education, but instead served primarily as storage, housing large, rolled-up wrestling mats stacked upright. The footage shows Kendrick heading toward the right side of the gym, moving out of the camera's view. That moment was the last confirmed sighting of him alive. When the school day ended, Kendrick did not return home as expected. His absence was unusual, and as evening fell, his mother, Jacqueline Johnson, began to grow deeply uneasy. By 10 p.m., after Kendrick failed to meet his curfew, Jacqueline drove to the school herself. She searched for signs of her son, but found none. Her concern intensified with every passing hour. At 12:30 a.m., unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, Jacqueline filed an official missing person report. When she contacted law enforcement, the initial response was dismissive. Officers suggested Kendrick might be staying with friends or perhaps with a girlfriend, downplaying the urgency of the situation. But Jacqueline knew her son's habits, his personality, and his sense of responsibility. She insisted that his absence was completely out of character. The significance of Kendrick's last known movements that afternoon became central to understanding the timeline of his disappearance. The surveillance footage, the missing hours, and his mother's unwavering instincts formed the foundation of a case that demanded answers. Jacqueline's determination to push for immediate action ensured that her son's disappearance would not be ignored. On January 11, 2013, the atmosphere at Lone D's High School shifted from routine to shock. Inside the old gym, a group of students made a disturbing discovery. A classmate noticed socks protruding from the opening of an upright wrestling mat. The mats, stored vertically and stacked against the wall, were taller than most students, making the details stand out. As the student looked closer, the realization came there was a body inside. Teachers rushed in as word spread, and students nearby gathered in confusion and alarm. When the mat was pulled down, the scene was grim. Kendrick Johnson's body was revealed, positioned upside down within the roll. The strong odor filled the space, confirming he had been there for hours. Blood and vomit were visible on the floor beneath the mat, signaling the tragic reality. Attempts to check for signs of life ended quickly. It was clear Kendrick was unresponsive. His position was unusual. One arm extended above his head, while the other rested around his waist. His jeans were unzipped, and his pockets partially turned out. On his body, searchers found his LG phone and headphones. These details were documented as officers arrived to secure the gym. Law enforcement locked down the school, removing students from the area and beginning their initial investigation. For Kendrick's family, the moment was devastating in a different way. Jacqueline and Kenneth Johnson were not permitted to see their son directly. Instead, identification came through their daughter, who recognized Kendrick by his shoe. The discovery shocked the entire student body, leaving teachers and classmates shaken. Word spread quickly through the school, carrying disbelief and sorrow. What began as an ordinary school day had transformed into one of grief, confusion, and haunting questions. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation performed the first autopsy on Kendrick Johnson and concluded his death was accidental. Their ruling cited positional asphyxia, a condition in which breathing is restricted by the body's position. Investigators suggested Kendrick had climbed into the upright mat to retrieve a shoe, became trapped inside, and ultimately suffocated. This explanation was presented as a tragic accident, an unforeseen event within the school's gym. From the beginning, however, questions emerged. Kendrick's shoulders measured wider than the mat's opening, raising doubts about whether he could have slipped inside as described. Friends explained that when retrieving shoes, students typically tilted the mats to reach inside rather than climbing headfirst. The accident theory seemed inconsistent with the way the mats were normally used. Physical details surrounding the discovery also fueled skepticism. Blood and vomit were found beneath Kendrick's head, yet other elements did not align with a straightforward accident. Shoes were located behind his knees. Nearby, a pair of shoes and a hoodie bore stains, and blood was seen on a gym wall, later determined unrelated to him. The presence of these unexplained details intensified concerns. Equally troubling were questions about evidence handling. Not all items at the scene were collected into custody, leaving doubts about the thoroughness of the investigation. For Jacqueline and Kenneth Johnson, these oversights compounded their grief. The official ruling provided little comfort. Instead, it deepened their mistrust of the conclusions offered by law enforcement. Within the community, skepticism mirrored the family's unease. The ruling of positional asphyxia appeared incomplete, unable to account for the surrounding circumstances. What officials labeled an accident, many others saw as unresolved and deeply troubling. The first autopsy, intended to provide clarity, instead marked the beginning of enduring doubt. In June 2013, the Johnson family obtained court approval to exhume Kendrick's body for a second autopsy. The procedure was carried out in Florida by Dr. William Anderson. His findings directly challenged the official explanation. During the examination, Anderson discovered that Kendrick's internal organs were missing, placed instead with crumpled newspaper. The funeral home maintained this substitution was standard practice, yet medical experts argued it was highly irregular and inconsistent with professional norms. For Kendrick's parents, this revelation was devastating. The absence of vital organs denied them a complete picture of how their son had died. Despite the controversy, Dr. Anderson pressed forward with his assessment. He concluded that Kendrick's death was not accidental. According to his report, the cause was non-accidental, blunt force trauma, a conclusion that stood in stark contrast to the ruling of positional asphyxia. Given by the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the dispute over the missing organs continued to stir public debate. Critics of the initial investigation pointed to the substitution of newspaper as further evidence that the handling of Kendrick's body was flawed. While the funeral home insisted it had done nothing unusual, the lack of clarity fueled the family's suspicion that crucial evidence had been compromised or disregarded. Years later, in 2018, Kendrick's body was exhumed once more for a third autopsy. This examination reaffirmed Anderson's earlier findings. The report stated Kendrick's death had been caused by blunt force trauma to the neck and thorax. Further contradicting the original accident ruling, these successive autopsies amplified the Johnson family's belief that foul play had occurred. Instead of resolution, each discovery deepened mistrust. underscoring their conviction that the initial investigation had been incomplete and gravely flawed. At the gym where Kendrick Johnson was found, several irregularities immediately raised concern. Blood was discovered on a wall near the mats, and testing later confirmed that it did not belong to Kendrick. Yet despite this finding, investigators never traced the blood to another individual. Nearby shoes bearing stains were left uncollected. A hoodie and a folder belonging to Kendrick were also present at the scene. But these items were not properly processed as evidence. The failure to secure such potentially significant materials left many questioning the thoroughness of the inquiry. The handling of Kendrick's body deepened those concerns. The coroner was not notified until 6 hours after the discovery, a delay that violated standard procedure. When he eventually arrived, he remarked that the body appeared to have been moved. His observation introduced another troubling layer of uncertainty, further eroding trust in the official handling of the scene. Attention then shifted to the school's surveillance system. Video footage was expected to provide clarity about Kendrick's final movements, but instead, it introduced new questions. Analysts who reviewed the tapes identified unexplained gaps. Portions of the recordings, particularly from the old gym where Kendrick was last seen, appeared to be missing. At least 1 hour of footage could not be accounted for, leaving a critical void in the timeline. Together, these issues painted a picture of an investigation riddled with inconsistencies, uncollected evidence, unexplained delays, and incomplete video records undermined confidence in the official narrative. For Kendrick's family, these failures were not minor errors but signs of a process that lacked transparency. Rather than closing the case, each irregularity only fueled suspicion that vital evidence had been overlooked or ignored. Kendrick Johnson's family refused to accept the conclusion that his death was accidental. From the earliest days, they organized vigils, standing in solemn gatherings to honor his memory and demand answers. Their determination soon extended into protests as they carried signs through the streets of Valdosta, voicing frustration with what they saw as a flawed and incomplete investigation. Civil rights activists quickly joined their call. Attorney Benjamin Crump, already known for taking on high-profile cases of racial injustice, became one of the strongest voices supporting the Johnsons. He echoed their belief that Kendrick's case was not an isolated tragedy, but part of a larger pattern of racial bias and inadequate attention to suspicious deaths involving Black youth. With his backing, the family's pursuit gained broader recognition, linking their personal fight to a national conversation. In courtrooms, the Johnsons sought legal recourse through wrongful death suits, pressing their claims despite repeated challenges. They organized marches, drawing supporters from across Georgia and beyond. At every step, their message remained consistent. Kendrick's death demanded transparency, accountability, and justice. Federal intervention became one of their central goals, as they argued that only outside authorities could properly review the circumstances. Their persistence achieved results. In 2019, officials announced the case would be reopened. To the family, this decision marked an opportunity for fresh scrutiny, a chance to re-examine evidence long overshadowed by the original accident ruling. 2 years later, in March 2021, a court formally granted a review of all evidence, reigniting hope that overlooked details might finally be addressed. Through vigils, lawsuits, protests, and relentless advocacy, the Johnson family transformed Kendrick's case into a national story. The resilience ensured his name remained central to conversations about justice, accountability, and racial equity in America. Despite years of inquiry, Kendrick Johnson's death remains without resolution. 3 separate autopsies have been performed, yet no consensus has been reached. Authorities continue to uphold the accident conclusion, maintaining that Kendrick became trapped while reaching for a shoe in the rolled mat. In stark contrast, his family insists foul play occurred, citing the weight of irregularities and unanswered questions. Among the most disturbing issues are the missing organs, a detail that continues to generate outrage and suspicion. Reports confirm that Kendrick's body was returned to his family without several vital organs. placed instead with newspaper. The family has repeatedly demanded accountability for how and why this occurred, but clear answers have never been provided. Unprocessed and untested evidence further complicates the case. Shoes with stains, clothing items, personal belongings were recovered, but not thoroughly examined, leaving gaps in the investigative record. The surveillance footage from the old gym also remains problematic. Analysts identified missing time, with segments of the recordings unaccounted for, particularly during the crucial window when Kendrick was last seen alive. Inconsistencies within official reports compound these frustrations, from the delayed arrival of the coroner to conflicting observations about whether the body had been moved. Each irregularity contributes to lingering mistrust. These flaws continue to fuel speculation, ensuring that the case remains part of ongoing public debate. Today, Kendrick's family continues its fight. It's demanding transparency and insisting his death cannot be dismissed as an accident. Their persistence reflects not only a personal search for justice, but also a broader call for accountability in how suspicious deaths are investigated. With no definitive closure, the case endures as a symbol of unanswered questions and the continuing struggle for truth. Kendrick Johnson's story did not end with the unanswered questions surrounding his death. Instead, it became a powerful legacy that continues to resonate far beyond Valdosta. For his family, Kendrick was never simply a headline or a case file. He was a son, a brother, a friend, and a young man remembered for his energy, his laughter, and the potential his future once promised. His absence left a permanent void, yet his name has grown into a symbol of resilience and a call for justice. The tragedy of Kendrick's death forced national attention on the ways investigations can reflect broader disparities. Civil rights groups, legal advocates, and community leaders often reference his case when raising concerns about transparency and fairness. His story has become a rallying point, sparking vigils, marches, and conversations about the rights of grieving families to demand accountability. In this way, Kendrick's memory is tied not only to loss, but also to a larger pursuit of reform. For his parents and siblings, the fight for justice is deeply personal. Every step they take, whether speaking at rallies, filing legal actions, or sharing his story with the world, reflects their determination to ensure Kendrick is remembered as more than a mystery. To them, he represents love, strength, and the belief that persistence can inspire change, even in the face of immense obstacles. Across the country, Kendrick's case is often cited alongside other examples of families who refuse to remain silent. His name has become part of a broader struggle for truth, one that demands society look closely at issues of equity, accountability, and justice. Though closure has yet to come, Kendrick's legacy endures as both memory and movement, carrying his story forward into the future.